because I have connections, and I confirmed that the autopsy was done. I don't want to say too much, but the autopsy yielded where the entry wound was and how the bullet killed him. It's already been determined. They found the bullet lodged in his body. They can tell you exactly where, what was severed, what killed him, where the bullet traveled from his neck down through his body.
My understanding from speaking with a couple of people high up at Turning Point USA, they let me know that the injury took place right below the jaw in the C2. The bullet crashed through C2 all the way through C7. And then they found the bullet lodged in that meaty area around T1, the thoracic first vertebrae.
Every day we hear reports, neatly packaged for the evening news. But behind every press conference, there's another version. The one buried beneath the official timeline, when the microphones go silent. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley University. Time. What began as a Us American comeback. Students pack the auditorium, phones out, live streaming every moment. There was laughter, shouting, tension, the sound of democracy in its rawest form. A single shot. Eyewitnesses say they saw Charlie Kirk collapse before they even processed the sound. Some screamed, "Down!" Panic erupted like wildfire. And yet, somehow, actually saw. They say it was a lone shooter on a rooftop overlooking the event. But for those who've spent months studying the angles, the ballistics, the story doesn't hold. Trajectory doesn't align with the E. The timestamp on one of the surveillance feeds is off by nearly 2 minutes. A flash. Closer. Lower. So what really happened that day? And why, months later, are so many of the files still sealed? Tonight, the story of Charlie Kirk's final moment isn't just about politics. Power over truth. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe. Not for clicks, but for clarity. The deeper we dig, the harder it gets to keep these files public. Hit that bell and let's uncover what really happened together. Official statements, carefully worded. They tell us what happened, when it happened, and how, behind every headline and flashing red banner, the one they don't print. When the cameras stop rolling, what are we really being told? 2:14 p.m. Mountain. Routine stop on Charlie Kirk's. Tour was supposed to be another fiery campus debate. Security lined the back walls. Then it happened. A single second that turned a conversation into chaos. A blur of security agents rushed forward. Others, "He's hit!" Over 3,000 people were there that afternoon, 3,000 witnesses. No one could agree on what they... Sniper, a .306 rifle. The official statement was clear, confident, immediate. The footage, the entry wound, the bullet's roof where the shooter was allegedly found. And the crowd footage, raw, unedited, shows something else. Who fired the shot that silenced a movement? We examined the chaos, the contradictions, and the cover-ups. It's about power. Power over what we're allowed to know. Because stories like this don't stay online for long. Stay with us. It was a crisp afternoon in Orem, Utah. September 10th, 2025, Utah Valley. University's quad was alive with the buzz of conversation, protest signs, and press badges. Charlie Kirk's American Comeback Tour had just begun, a cross-country series meant to challenge, provoke, and reignite debate on America's college campuses. Inside the packed auditorium, the atmosphere was electric. Over 3,000 attendees filled the hall, students, activists, local officials, and media crews. Some came to listen, others came to argue. But everyone knew one thing: Charlie Kirk never left a stage quietly. Security was visible but calm. Uniformed guards at every corner, metal detectors at the door, and yet something felt off. To those who were there was a tension in the air that day, the kind that sits quietly until it suddenly isn't. Cameras lined the venue. Dozens of phones live-streamed every word, every moment. On stage, Kirk stood confidently, sleeves rolled, mic in hand, answering questions about free speech, about gun control, about the role of activism in modern America. The crowd buzzed with anticipation as the next question was asked. Then at exactly 2:14 p.m., as Charlie Kirk began responding to a question about political violence, a single sharp sound cut through the air. The noise was so sudden, so precise that for half a second no one moved. And then chaos. Charlie Kirk dropped instantly, the microphone tumbling from his hand. Panic broke out in waves. Students screamed, dove behind chairs. Others froze in place, trying to understand what had just happened. Security stormed the stage, dragging Kirk's limp body behind the podium. His white shirt was stained red. The wound, a clean strike to the neck, had been fatal on impact. Outside, chaos spilled into the courtyard. Some thought it was fireworks. Others shouted, "Shooter on the roof!" And in the confusion, phones went up, live streams capturing the panic in real time, feeding it instantly to millions watching online. Within minutes, law enforcement swarmed the area. The entire campus was locked down. SWAT teams and FBI field agents converged on the scene, searching rooftops, scanning windows, combing every stairwell for a sniper. Social media exploded. Hashtags Charlie Kirk shooting, Charlie UVU attack, Shah's American comeback flooded every feed. Eyewitness accounts conflicted. Some claimed the shooter was on the library roof. Others swore they saw flashes from a nearby parking garage. But by nightfall, an official name was released. Tyler James Robinson, 22 years old, a former student. A quiet young man with no prior record. The FBI reported finding a .306 hunting rifle, spent shell casings, and scattered ammunition in a wooded area behind the university. Investigators also found shoe impressions, size 11, hiking tread, and partial palm prints on the weapon's grip. It looked like an open and shut case. But even in those early hours, pieces weren't adding up. Witnesses reported hearing more than one shot. Some footage suggested movement on multiple rooftops, and questions began to rise fast. Was Tyler Robinson acting alone, or was he just the face of something much larger? The nation watched in disbelief as the story unfolded. A political leader dead, a suspect identified, and a country once again asking how far its divisions had gone. This was no ordinary shooting. This was the beginning of a mystery. The moment Charlie Kirk's body was airlifted from Utah Valley University, a nationwide manhunt began. The shooter, identified as Tyler James Robinson, had vanished without a trace. For the next 33 hours, Robinson's name dominated every screen in America. Helicopters circled mountain ridges. SWAT vehicles combed rural Utah. Drones scanned fields, parking structures, even underground tunnels. But he was nowhere. Then, quietly, the manhunt ended. It wasn't a SWAT raid or a shootout. It was a phone call. Robinson's parents, after seeing their son's face on national television, reached out to a retired detective, a family friend. They said he's scared. He doesn't know what's happening. And through that detective, they arranged a peaceful handoff. At 11:47 p.m., Tyler Robinson surrendered in a dimly lit parking lot just 5 miles from his family home. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. Officers described him as calm, detached, almost numb. The image that flooded the news the next morning, a young man in handcuffs, head down, flanked by agents, became the face of a nation's grief and outrage. Prosecutors wasted no time. Within 48 hours, Tyler James Robinson was charged with aggravated murder, firearm discharge causing death, and witness tampering. The district attorney announced publicly that they would pursue the death penalty. Headlines read, "Case closed, campus shooter in custody." But the evidence didn't agree. The .306 rifle found in the woods, it had been wiped clean, no prints, no sweat, no oil. What few fingerprints investigators did recover from the magazine plate were incomplete and did not fully match Robinson's. More troubling still, DNA found on a screwdriver left near the sniper's perch belonged to someone else entirely. Not Robinson, not a law enforcement officer. An unknown male. These weren't small inconsistencies, they were cracks in the very foundation of the case. Forensics couldn't prove he fired the weapon. The trajectory reports didn't line up with his alleged position. And the timeline between the final shot and his escape, nearly impossible. Yet the prosecution pressed forward. They needed closure. The public wanted answers, and a neatly packaged narrative, a lone gunman, a motive, an arrest, was easier to sell than uncertainty. But behind closed doors, investigators whispered what the public was only beginning to suspect. If Tyler Robinson didn't pull the trigger, then who did? And that's when the theories began. Online sleuths dissected every frame of video. Forensic experts questioned the ballistics. Former intelligence analysts claimed the shooting bore the signature of a coordinated hit, not a campus ambush. In a world flooded with information, one thing was clear. The official story no longer made sense. In the days following the assassination, the FBI released its preliminary ballistic report. According to officials, the fatal round was a high-velocity .306 bullet fired from an elevated position, a classic sniper setup. They claimed the angle was steep. The distance was long and the trajectory was clean. But independent experts weren't convinced. The wound pattern didn't match. For a .306 round, a bullet known for devastating impact. The exit wound was far too small. No heavy tissue disruption, no trace of fragmentation consistent with long-range ballistics. Instead, it resembled something far less powerful, something closer. And then there was the angle. The FBI described a steep, downward shot consistent with a rooftop marksman. But autopsy data revealed an almost horizontal trajectory. If that were true, the shooter couldn't have been where they said he was. That's when investigators, and the public, began reviewing surveillance footage frame by frame. At first, nothing unusual. Then, just minutes after the fatal shot, movement. 2 unidentified figures near the wood line. Roughly 60 yards from the main event site. One appeared to be handling an object, long, dark, metallic, consistent with the dimensions of a rifle. The other reached upward, toward a nearby security camera. And then, the footage ends. The feed cuts mid-motion, as if manually interrupted. When the FBI released the official clips to the media, that segment was gone. Redacted, cropped, replaced, with a generic timestamp gap. Who were they? Why were those specific frames missing? And why did the government release edited footage? When the public demanded transparency, the Bureau maintained its position. Tyler Robinson acted alone. They cited motive, opportunity, and presence near the area. But for every piece of evidence that supported their claim, another emerged that tore it apart. Gunshot residue tests on Robinson's clothing came back inconclusive. The recovered rifle bore no usable prints. The DNA on the screwdriver, found near the sniper's perch, belonged to someone else entirely. Each unanswered question made the lone gunman narrative harder to believe. Experts whispered about planted evidence, tampered footage, and a possible second shooter. Online forums exploded with speculation, while inside the FBI, investigators quietly re-examined their own files. What began as a straightforward case, one shooter, one shot, one motive, had now become a maze of contradictions, and deep inside that maze lay the possibility that the truth had been deliberately obscured. Within days, the internet exploded. Hashtags, memes, threads. Everyone had a theory. And no 2 stories were the same. Some insisted Tyler Robinson wasn't acting alone, that he was part of a larger network, trained, funded, and positioned to make the hit look random. Others claimed political operatives, the kind working behind closed doors, orchestrated the assassination for reasons no one dared say aloud. And in that chaos, the truth drowned. For every fact the FBI released, 100 counterclaims surfaced within minutes. Forums filled with screenshots, timestamps, and grainy stills from the event. Every shadow became a suspect. Every sound became proof. The Bureau tried to calm the storm, holding briefings, releasing partial reports, promising transparency, but mistrust had already taken root. To millions of Americans, the official story felt like another carefully scripted performance. Then came the memorial. Hundreds gathered to honor Charlie Kirk, family, friends, supporters. Cameras rolled, flags hung at half-mast. Outside, the crowd swelled. But grief wasn't the only emotion in the air. In the middle of the service, police moved in on a man pacing near the steps, visibly armed. When questioned, he shouted that he was a martyr for Kirk, he said voices. Online had told him this wasn't the end, that the mission had to continue. He was taken into custody within seconds. But that single arrest turned the memorial into a flashpoint. Proof to some that something much darker was unfolding. By then, America wasn't just mourning Charlie Kirk. It was questioning what truth even meant anymore. Every outlet, every commentator, every citizen seemed to live in their own version of reality. Facts had become flexible. Grief had turned into ideology. And then, amidst the noise, the speculation, and the chaos, one voice broke through. Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, took the stage at a Turning Point USA event. Her voice trembled, but her conviction didn't. If we let violence silence speech, she said, we lose the foundation of who we are. The room fell silent. For the first time since the shot that shattered a nation. It wasn't politics speaking, it was pain. Months after the shooting, the noise had quieted, but only on the surface. Behind sealed doors, inside FBI labs and private forensic facilities, the real work had just begun. Technicians re-examined every piece of evidence. The rifle, the shell casings. The screwdriver discovered just yards from where police said the shooter fled. Each was tested, retested, logged, and cataloged. And then, they found it. DNA traces, faint but distinct, on both the weapon and the screwdriver. But neither matched Tyler Robinson. Not his skin cells. not his sweat, not his blood. Someone else had handled the weapon. That single revelation reignited the fire. Online forums roared back to life. Analysts, journalists, and self-proclaimed experts flooded the airwaves with one question. Was there a second shooter? Or worse, was Robinson being used as a cover? Inside law enforcement circles, silence grew heavier. The Bureau issued short statements, vague, procedural, almost indifferent. No new suspects named. No follow-up press briefings. No release of the full forensic report. Forensic analysts, the ones who've worked real crime scenes, were quick to remind the public that silence doesn't always mean conspiracy. Sometimes it means complexity. Sometimes the science just isn't clear yet. But for the millions still following this case, that explanation wasn't enough. Each unanswered question deepened the wound. Each withheld report felt like a betrayal. Because when a man is gunned down in broad daylight, when the footage, the evidence, and the motive all seem fractured, people don't wait for answers. They create their own, and so even as the official investigation trudges on in silence, the public investigation, the one fought on podcasts, message boards, and nightly talk shows, only grows louder. The case of Charlie Kirk's assassination isn't over. It's just entered a quieter, more dangerous phase where truth, fiction, and faith in the system blur into one. The assassination of Charlie Kirk is more than a headline. It's a reflection, a mirror held up to a divided nation. A nation where every truth is questioned, every fact is filtered through suspicion, and every silence sounds like guilt. One man, one bullet, and 1,000 interpretations. In the chaos of opinion, something deeper has been lost. The ability to believe what we see, to trust what we hear. September 10th, 2025, a day that began with a promise of conversation, and ended with the sound of a rifle echoing across a campus. In the aftermath, questions multiplied. Evidence shifted. Truth fractured. But beyond the politics, beyond the outrage lies a sobering truth. That violence doesn't just silence a person. It silences possibility. It reminds us how easily passion becomes weapon, and how fragile democracy truly is when facts become targets. The search for truth is far from over. Somewhere in the data, in the files, in the unspoken conversations, the real story still lives, waiting to be found, waiting to be heard. Because in stories like this, paying attention isn't passive, it's power. And the moment we stop questioning, the moment we stop listening, is the moment we lose the truth entirely. I'm Detective Jacobs. This is the story behind the silence.